time for us to go live for our webinar, Decoding the AI Health Code. Are we future ready? I welcome you all from JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research. And we all know the importance of this present webinar, which we are hosting worldwide today. And we have all the participants from various disciplines participating today and coming here on a single platform so that we start brainstorming about AI, that is artificial intelligence in applications of health. It's my pleasure to hand over the platform to Dr. H. Baswangodappa, who is the principal of JSS Medical College. After a triumphant NIRF ranking in the top 50, and also the university, along with its constituent colleges, has been very triumphant in the National Institutional Ranking Framework. All the institutions coming in top 50. It is a matter of pride for us to have this webinar immediately after this ranking. And sir, I request now Dr. H. Baswangodappa to introduce the particular topic of today's webinar, why, what, and how we go about it with his curtain raiser.
Good afternoon to everybody. I once again welcome all the participants for this webinar, which is a unique one. And we have this webinar is a basic concept given by our Pro-Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor when they called Vikram Patil and then discussed. They wanted to have an understanding and a depiction of the knowledge related to artificial intelligence. So today's webinar is coined as Decoding the Artificial Intelligence Health Code. Are we future ready? Friends, I submit my sincere pranams to Jagadugu Sri Sivaratri Rajendra Mahaswamiji, seek the blessing from current Swamiji, Sivaratri Desikendra Mahaswamiji, who is our Chancellor. With their blessing, we have this program today for you. In this program, we're going to have opening remark by our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surinder Singh. Later on, a word of wisdom will be expressed by Dr. B. Suresh, our Pro-Chancellor, who gave this concept for us to start a webinar. Then there are a galaxy of 4 distinguished resource persons. Dr. Sandeep Reddy from Australia, from Deakin University, Australia. He'll be talking on AI in healthcare. Followed by our own faculty, Dr. Sudhar Kiran Das. She will be talking to us on AI in radiology. Is it a hype or a hope? Then another faculty of our own, Dr. Vikram Patil, will be presenting his presentation on health education and AI from bench to bedside. Last presenter will be from UK, Dr. Krishna Buddu, CEO of IMERA. He will present his presentation on AI and healthcare industry, the challenges and the questions and opportunities. Friends, I request all of you, if you have any questions raising during these presentations, to put them in chat box. We will appropriately pick up and answer them depending on the time permissibility. Lastly, our Director of Academics, Dr. P.A. Kushalappa, will give his conclusion and reciprocation from the academy. Friends, we all know artificial intelligence is a growing phenomenon. It has a wide-scale changes. It will produce a wide-scale changes in health education and healthcare delivery. The students, educators, researchers need to have a thorough knowledge about artificial intelligence because the future is belonging to artificial intelligence because it's going to make a lot of impact. The medical artificial intelligence primarily concerned with construction of AI programs that perform diagnosis and make therapy recommendations. Friends, we are all endorsed with revolutionary adaptation of medical science to technological advancement in 21st century. The AI is an underutilized domain of technology in healthcare. The future of healthcare in the world is expected to be largely driven through AI. So if that is so, when we look into the need and evidence, do we have ample evidence for AI to be ruling the world in the future? Yes, we have been flooded with information. A lot of information, we get drowned in information. There's a need for a newer concept in research data analysis, which is happening. And AI is going to emerge as a very powerful adjunct to human intelligence. There are several researchers who have proven that AI is going to be more superior than human intelligence in trying to bring a quick remedial measures in trying to diagnose diseases. So what are the applications of AI in healthcare? It will be useful in diagnosing complex disorders. It can help you to choose a precision treatment. It can help you in trying to do a drug discovery. And there are evidences and papers to say it can help us in personalized care of the health needed by an individual. And it can also help in predicting epidemic. It can help in devising and trying to do a different kind of clinical trials. And it is very much useful right now. It is being used. Radiology is one area where the imaging technology is making the most use of the AI in both diagnostic as well as radiotherapy aspect. And ultimately, it can also help us in a smart electronic health records. Friends, with all its accomplishment, the JSS Academy of Higher Education Research and the Medical College have done wonderfully well. In the short journey of 12 years, the Academy has acquired NAC A+ grade, 33rd rank among the 1,600 participating universities in the country, and we have been featured in higher rank at the Times Higher Education World Ranking. The QS Star ranking has given us 4 stars. Karnataka State University ranking has given us a first rank among the young universities for the last 2 consecutive years. JSS Medical College, among the top 20 medical institutions in the country, has been rated that way in the recently concluded national ranking by the Government of India. Testimony for that is last week, we got a news that 17 of our MBBS students have been awarded a short-term scholarship by ICMR. This is the highest for any given medical college. And all these are possible because of the dynamic leadership by our Professor Dr. B. Suresh and the present Vice Chancellor Dr. Surinder Singh, and the blessings by Swamiji. The key questions in relation to AI is how artificial intelligence can help transform Indian health care. There are several evidences that clinicians can make use of this and shorten their time spent on trying to crack the diagnosis and plan the therapy. The precision medicine and machine learning is going to be impactful more in the future healthcare delivery area. We can also know that the available plenty of data, it needs to be put in a proper perspective and analyzed. To do this job today, this webinar, I have 4 guest faculty. Dr. Sandeep Reddy will be starting his presentation. He is a medical informatician, health program evaluator. He is interested in translational medicine. He is an associate professor of Deakin University, Australia, and founder chairman of mediai.com. I'm proud to say Dr. Sandeep is our adjunct faculty. Then we have another distinguished guest faculty from UK, Dr. Krishna Boddo. He is the CEO of IMERA London. IMERA already are our partners in AI-related research activity. They are already doing 2 programs with us. He is a consultant orthopedic surgeon in King's Hospital, London. Friends, we have 2 faculty from our institution. Dr. Sudha Kiran Das is Associate Professor of Radiology at our institution, and she is a committed academician, and she is pursuing her PhD right now. And Dr. Vikram Patil is Assistant Professor of Radiology, and he is the key person who has designed this program, convened, because we have made him in charge of Artificial Intelligence Center of JSS EHR at Medical College. He is also a chief coordinator for a very, very innovative website designed by him and maintained by him for the last 4 or 5 years, and it is visited and used by nearly 145 countries. Friends, these are our distinguished galaxy of the guest faculty. I only take this opportunity for thanking all of you who have joined just now for this webinar. I wish this webinar a very grand success. Thank you all for giving this opportunity to raise the curtain and take you through to the program. Next in 5 minutes, I take this opportunity to introduce our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surinder Singh, who is a simple gentleman, a good academician, and he is taking all of us together in the further progression of the JSS Academy of Higher Education Research. Sir, I now request you to make your presentation on your opening remarks for this webinar. Thank you. I request Dr. Surinder Singh, our Vice Chancellor, to give his opening remarks.
Sir, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You can go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Baswana Godapaji. Good afternoon to all of you. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Dr. Baswana Godapa, the Principal Medical College and his team, and the JSS Hospital for having come together and organized this webinar on use of artificial intelligence in healthcare, which is, I think, very relevant in today's context. And especially when our medical college has done very well in NIRF ranking, it becomes imperative that we venture into new areas of research which can help us coming out with a good publications and also have tie-up with other counterparts, the premier institutes in the country. Now, the objectives of this webinar is to, first of all, to carve out an understanding that how artificial intelligence can be used in healthcare and what is its relevance and how it is being used within our country and outside also. How the faculty and the students can be involved in artificial intelligence related healthcare research and learning. As I just said, now the research and publications, they are becoming very important benchmarks to get good NIRF ranking and also international rankings also such. And this is expected to facilitate it. The third objective of today's webinar is how the engineering fraternity can be having an understanding of the needs of artificial intelligence in healthcare and where we can jointly work together with them so that their domain expertise and knowledge with the data analytics can be used in our healthcare system. And the fourth major objective is to forge an industry academia collaborations in the field of artificial intelligence in healthcare research. And these four objectives are expected to have three major outcomes. The first is it is going to ramp up the quality of research being done in our university, especially in our medical college, by exploiting the artificial intelligence use in the healthcare sector. Second is, it will also help, as I said earlier, in forging a working collaborative relationship between the healthcare professionals and our engineering fraternity, where we come together and look forward for the opportunities and the challenges which are being thrown up by artificial intelligence in the healthcare sector. And the third major outcome would be to develop jointly along with the engineering fraternity and also in-house the artificial intelligence tools which can be used as an aid in the prevention, diagnosis and management of the diseases and promoting overall health in the population. I wish all the participants who are there for today's webinar a very happy learning experience, and these sessions, which are very well structured, I hope they will go a long way in nurturing and enriching your knowledge. I wish all of you a very happy learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. B. Suresh, will be joining us a little later, and he will pitch in some time in between and give his words of wisdom. I'll take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Sandeep Reddy to make his presentation on the topic.
Thank you, Principal. Let me share my screen first.
Sandeep Reddy.
Hopefully everybody can see my screen.
Yeah, sure, we can see it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the senior faculty of JSS Academy for inviting me. And I'm very pleased to and honored to be here today to present about AI in healthcare. So the topic of my presentation is AI in healthcare and why it's changing the way we are going to be delivering healthcare. That's why I title it a paradigm shift. So the outline for today's presentation is, I was planning to talk about myself, but the principal kindly introduced me, so I won't spend too much time about that. But I would like to focus on a couple of areas in terms of AI in healthcare. First, I would like to talk about why we should consider AI in healthcare. Is there a necessity for us to consider AI in healthcare? And then after covering that, I'd like to introduce what is AI, what's the definition of AI, so that we are all on the same page as to what AI is. And then I'll talk about the different types of AI. And following that, we'll talk about how AI is being used in healthcare in myriad ways, in various ways. It's just not enough to know about the benefits and the opportunities of AI in healthcare. We also need to know about the challenges. It's very important to have a balanced perspective. So I'll be also covering that area. And finally, towards the end, I'll be talking about how we go about implementing whatever we covered in the previous sections. So I'll skip this part where it talks about myself and jump straight to why we should consider AI in healthcare. So all this data that I'm going to be talking about in this slide, in the next slide, comes from the government of India. So this is documented in various publications. So one of the issues that we face in healthcare, immaterial of which part of the world, whether it's in India or Australia, is barriers to access to healthcare. And when I talk about barriers, both financial barriers and geographical barriers. This is compounded in India. When you talk about the spread of the medical workforce, especially about the doctors, the current spread is 0.76 doctors per 1,000 population across India. When the World Health Organization actually specifies that we need 1 doctor per 1,000 population. So you can see the shortage of medical workforce there. It's just not doctors, but also in terms of infrastructure, we also have shortages. For example, we have 1.3 hospital beds per 1,000 population, when the World Health Organization actually states that we need 3.5 hospital beds per 1,000 population. This is further compounded and becomes more complex in rural areas because of limited infrastructure and also reluctance on specialist medical workforce to reside in those areas. And the further issues that compound or complex healthcare is the variability in healthcare, especially in terms of delivery and quality of healthcare. When you look at the number of hospitals in India that are accredited, it's less than 2% of the total number of hospitals. So you can see that itself can contribute to the varied delivery of healthcare. And then when you talk about the affordability, even though we have a large public health system in India, most of the spend is in private expenditure. About 70% of healthcare expenditure is from private. And of that, about 62% is out-of-pocket expenditure. Further, when you look at the healthcare delivery or access to healthcare, because of the earlier specified barriers, people come to the hospitals or come to the healthcare quite late. And what this means is they're quite advanced in their medical conditions. And because of that, there is increased cost of care, but also there is reduced chances of recovery. So we can understand definitely there are healthcare issues in terms of both in terms of delivery, but also maintaining and sustaining of healthcare service delivery. Because of all these issues, stakeholders, policy persons, government authorities, clinicians, a lot of people have been looking at various solutions, and AI as a technology has been proposed as one of the solutions because AI has an ability through its various types to be able to service the different issues that we talked about and mitigate and address those issues. Now that we discussed what are the issues that health systems face, we need to understand what AI is. So the various definitions about AI, so I picked two definitions. So one definition comes from Niti Aayog, which is a government of India agency. It talks about AI being a constellation of technologies that enable machines to act with higher levels of intelligence and emulate the human capabilities of sense, comprehend, and act. It's a very nice definition, but really it's hard to remember. So that's why I like this definition, which I formulated, which talks about machines assuming human-like intelligence. When I refer to machines here, I'm talking about computers and software. So it's quite an easy definition, but also it captures the essence of AI. So now that we're on the same page as to what AI means, what the definition of AI, let's learn about the different types. So AI is quite a broad term. And in the past, we used to have something called expert systems, which was basically you would try to anticipate each and every eventuality and code your software according to that. But as you're aware, the data that is available now is huge. And the expert systems have failed in terms of analyzing the data. So in the relatively recent years, there's been emergence of a newer form of AI that is called as machine learning. And nowadays, whatever we see in terms of application of AI, it's likely to be machine learning. It's the most commonest approach in terms of AI. So what is machine learning? To define machine learning, it's easier to compare it to the regular software or regular programming. So in regular programming, what you do is you try to anticipate each and every kind of result and program your rules according to that. But in machine learning, what you do is you allow the algorithm or allow the software itself to learn the rules by recognizing patterns or being able to predict the results. And that's why it's called as machine learning. The machine itself learns the rules. So within machine learning, there are various types. We don't have the time to go through all of the types, but I would like to highlight two types, which is supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Basically, the reason we call that is when we use data to train the AI models, if we label the data, it's called as supervised learning. And if we do not label the data, we call it unsupervised learning. Of course, there are different types of machine learning, but we'll not spend too much time on that. If we can remember the supervised learning and unsupervised learning, which are most commonly used, that suffices for today. But I would like to mention one more type of machine learning, which is an advanced form of deep learning. And that's where a lot of results that we are seeing, whether it's in medicine or in other sectors, is in. So what is deep learning? To explain deep learning, I would like to present this illustration of how a deep learning computer architecture would look like. So computer scientists and other people who have been dabbling in AI some years ago got inspired by human intelligence. Obviously, we're talking about intelligence now in terms of artificial intelligence. And then they started to look at how human beings have intelligence. And that's because of our brain or our central nervous system. And they replicated the same architecture in computer terms. And that's what you see on the screen. Imagine you're seeing a neuron with its dendrites, axons, and its synapses. And if you want to replicate and simulate that in computer architecture, that's what you see. So those circles are neurons, and the lines which would have been axons here are called as edges, and they're connected with each other. So what happens is you input the data, and the data goes through those neurons through layers. And because of the number of layers, this kind of machine learning algorithm is more superior to classical machine learning algorithms or other kind of AI systems. But unfortunately, because of that complexity and because of the hidden layers in the middle, it also becomes very, very hard to unravel the decision-making process. And that becomes more complex in terms of medicine, because in medicine, we want transparent decision-making. On the other hand, because of that complexity, it also is able to predict results much better than other kind of algorithms. So that was in very brief what AI was, what are the different types. And now let's look at the process in developing AI models. Again, I'm trying to capture things in very brief because of the time. There's much more technicalities involved with it, but I would like to give you the essence of developing an AI model. Most of the time, most of the ways in which AI models are developed is this process which you see on the slide. Basically, we acquire the data, we pre-process the data or clean up the data, then we label the data, we attach labels to the data, and then we split up the data into two parts. That's the training part, and then there's the test part. And usually it's in the ratio of 80 to 20%, 80% for the training part, 20% for the testing part. So then what we do is we run the AI algorithm. Within machine learning, there are so many algorithms that we can spend the whole day talking about it. But whatever algorithm what we do is we initially run the algorithm on the training data. Once we acquire the results that we are happy with, then we test the algorithm on the test data. once the results you are expecting are achieved, then you potentially can deploy it. Or you can go to another step, which is recommended, especially in medicine, is to run the algorithm on external data. That means data acquired from a completely different source, and that is called as external validation. So 95% of the time when you see AI models, they usually go through this process. There are a couple of algorithms which go through a different process, but mostly this is the process in which AI models are developed. Before we get to the next section of this presentation, I would like to briefly cover this part because this is something critical for our understanding where we stand in terms of AI currently. So not most of it, nearly 100% of it, what we see today is something we call as artificial narrow intelligence or weak AI. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that is whatever AI models that we are developing are focused on a particular function, one or two functions. As human beings, we do several things, both in our professional life, in our personal life. And at this stage, there is no AI model which can completely replicate what, as human beings, we can do in terms of our intelligence. AI models, even though they may perform better than human beings, they perform better in a particular area or a particular function, not in all functions. And the ability to simulate completely what we do is called as artificial general intelligence or strong AI. And that is not in existence currently. And many people say that is many, many years away, depending upon how the AI models get developed and then how we get to use them in various areas. Now, let's come to the area which you're really interested in and why you're here today, that is application of AI in healthcare. AI is getting used in medicine and its subdisciplines. You can name any discipline and it's getting used directly or indirectly. So we don't have the time to cover everything, but I would like to focus on three popular areas where AI is getting used the most. And these areas are medical imaging analysis, or in other words, interpretation of medical images. And the second area is clinical decision support systems, where computer software is used to aid clinicians in their treatment and management. And the last area is natural language processing applications. Natural language processing is where computers are used to interpret human language. Now let's look at medical imaging analysis. So even before the advent of AI or use of AI to interpret medical images, whether it's X-rays, CTs, MRIs, and other medical image modalities, computers have been used in the past to interpret medical images. So it's nothing new to use computers. But what is new is use of machine learning, in specific deep learning. And within deep learning, a particular type of algorithm called convolutional neural network has been used and shown to have major prowess in interpreting images and identifying target classes or the kind of medical abnormalities or medical diseases in images. So what are convolutional neural networks, or CNN in short? So here you see an architecture of a CNN. So mathematically and technically, it would take a longer time to describe this, but quickly to explain it in a simple way, CNNs break down the medical images into parts and then reassemble them to identify the particular target class or the particular areas where the problem is. For example, if you have an X-ray image with a lobar pneumonia, what it does is tries to identify where the abnormalities are and then present them in a appropriate fashion so that radiologists and other treating clinicians can get a confirmatory or differential diagnosis. Because the way it goes about is in a convoluted manner, it's called as convolutional neural networks. And nearly most of the algorithms, deep learning algorithms that are being used to interpret images nowadays are convolutional neural networks. So here you see an illustration of how convolutional neural networks can be used for classification of images or segmentation of images. In terms of classification, it can be whether the lesion is present or not. In terms of segmentation, it can divide the images into various areas. So convolutional neural networks are not just used for interpreting MRI, CT, and X-ray images. They can be also used to analyze fundoscopic images. For example, here, convolutional neural networks have been used to identify diabetic retinopathy. And interestingly, convolutional neural networks have been able to also identify the gender and the age of the patient just based on the fundoscopic images. And talking about it further, in machine learning, we use a performance metric called area under the curve, especially classification algorithms. And area curve under the curve is higher the curve and closer to 1, the higher the performance. And as you can see in this particular slide, convolutional neural networks used to identify diabetic retinopathy have performed very accurately. In fact, close to what ophthalmologists, or even better than what ophthalmologists can identify in a fundoscopic image. Just to close off the medical imaging, I wanted to bring this up. This is a very recent development by an institute in Toronto. So what they've done is they basically made available a web-based applications where you can upload an X-ray image, anybody in any part of the world, and based on the image, and if it has any of those 14 medical conditions listed on the right, it can tell you whether the condition is present or not, or the degree of the presence of the condition, or the risk of that condition being available. For me, there's a couple of interesting things that come about it. One, it is basically available to any part of the world. Basically, it's democratizing AI and bringing the specialist knowledge, radiologist knowledge to the general public. Of course, they have a disclaimer saying that this is an experimental site. It is not to be seen as a replacement of radiologist knowledge. But for radiologists also, there is an advantage by having this kind of features or this kind of applications. They can have a second opinion. Of course, it's restricted to those 14 medical conditions, but you can see the possibilities or the potential of this growing beyond those 14 medical conditions. The other beauty of this, other feature of this application is that it doesn't take your data from your computer. In fact, it analyzes the data by keeping the data in your computer. It just sends the algorithms to the server, and the provider itself or the vendor itself doesn't have access to any of the patient data. So that was very in brief medical imaging interpretation. Because there are other speakers who are going to be talking about how AI is being used in radiology, I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but probably it gives you an idea of what AI can do in terms of interpreting medical images. Now I'd like to focus about clinical decision support systems. So what are clinical decision support systems? As I mentioned earlier, these are software which aid clinicians in their treatment and management of various medical conditions. Using computers or computer-based guidelines for treatment and management is not new. What is new is the use of deep learning as part of that software. And because deep learning has that ability to crunch big data or complex data, it has accelerated and enabled better treatment and improved the quality of treatment in many situations, case studies. So let's look at some of the examples here. So one example here is, here in this case, deep learning algorithms or machine learning algorithms like support vector machines, artificial neural networks, decision tree, and ensemble model has been used to support clinicians or physicians in treatment and management of chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases like emphysema or chronic bronchitis. So this is just one example of how AI is being used to aid a particular medical condition or treatment and management of a particular medical condition, but you can imagine this kind of architecture or model being used for various medical conditions. The reason it's useful is that nowadays we have a lot of clinical guidelines, right? And there is newer forms of treatment coming. It's humanly impossible to keep up to date with all that is happening. So imagine a clinical decision support system aided by an AI and being used to analyze all the data and being able to give you recommendations or differential diagnosis based on patient data and based on clinical guidelines. And that will definitely improve the quality of care. Another example of how clinical decision support systems are being used, in this case, it's using patient data and also image data, image modalities. In this case, it's trying to identify various skin lesions or skin conditions, including psoriasis, eczema, and those kind of conditions. In this case, it's coming from a study which found that this clinical decision support system was equivalent or even sometimes superior to board certified dermatologists. So the ability of AI-enabled clinical decision support system is improving as time progresses. So that was kind of in brief clinical decision support system. I say watch the space in this area because as algorithms get better and as people acquire more and more data, we will start to see more and more use of clinical decision support systems driven by AI models. And now let's come to natural language processing applications. Before we get to how and what NLP applications are, let's understand what natural language processing means. What it means here is computers being used to interpret human language, whether it's written or oral. It's not just interpreting, but also understanding. While we do not have any algorithm which can truly understand human language, algorithms have got better because of recent developments in terms of how models work, natural language processing model works, especially transformer kind of models. And how is that useful in healthcare? In healthcare, we can imagine NLP applications being used to interpret medical literature, which is increasing every year, also drawing upon data from electronic health records and interpreting what kind of abnormalities are or identifying the treatments that are available and easing the life of physicians. Not only there, in outpatient settings, NLP applications can be used for transcription of communication between the doctor and the patient and reducing the need to document the conversations. Also, NLP applications can be used for symptom checkers, as you can see in this example. For example, in the UK, Babylon has a symptom checker or a medical chatbot, which presents differential diagnosis and based on the severity or based on the condition, presents different referral services and telehealth services. Similar to Babylon in the US, its counterpart called Sensely as a virtual nurse assistant also through patient-entered details can identify a differential diagnosis and refer the patient to an appropriate service. So we got, and even there are many examples in India, as you may be aware. So that's one example of NLP application. NLP applications can also be used within a clinical decision support system by parsing the words and undergoing semantic and syntactic processing, understanding the meaning behind the phrases, and arriving at differential diagnosis. So NLP applications can be used as part of clinical decision support system and elevate the possibilities of what clinical decision support systems can use. Before I come to kind of end the various ways where AI is being used, I just wanted to highlight this recent development. So we saw AI being used in medicine and those kind of areas, radiology, but AI is also being used in surgery. We are very familiar with Da Vinci kind of machines, which are not AI kind of models. What they do is basically surgeons manipulate their robotic arms. That's not truly AI. What you see in the picture is something which is going to develop further and can enable autonomous AI surgery. In this case, trials have been held in California where they have used truly autonomous robotic arms to undertake minor suturing. Of course, within suturing, depending upon the tissue, there's complexities involved. So there is further development to be done. But in this case, they were able to have the AI model perfectly imitate suturing motions on a non-human tissue, but they are starting to look at further trials and developing this further. So in some years to come, we may start to see autonomous AI surgery, maybe not in complex major surgeries, but at least in minor surgeries. So watch the space again. I just wanted to take the opportunity also to highlight how AI is being used in the current pandemic. There have been some questions before the pandemic whether AI can play a role. I just wanted to quickly go through a couple of examples where AI is being used in the current pandemic so you can understand AI does have a role in the current pandemic. So one very good example is Blue Dot, which is a Canadian startup, and they use basically machine learning algorithms to crunch huge amount of data to identify infectious disease outbreaks across the world. So they were one of the first agencies or entities in the world to actually identify atypical pneumonia outbreak in Wuhan in China. That's where the SARS-CoV-2, the virus which causes COVID-19, emerged. And they were able to issue the results well before the World Health Organization. So that's just one example of how AI is being used for surveillance, not just with COVID-19, but other infectious disease outbreaks also are being tracked by this particular agency. Another example is AI being used as secondary screening, analyze CT images for ground glass opacities, which seem to be common in COVID-19 patients. Again, not used as primary screening, but in adjunct with PCR testing and as a secondary screening tool. Another example where AI has been used in the current pandemic is to unravel or decipher the protein structure of the virus. And why is that important? It's useful to formulate specific vaccines and treatments. So here is an example of DeepMind, which is a Google subsidiary, identifying the membrane protein of the SARS-CoV-2, which will help in formulating specific treatments or vaccines for the virus. So that was kind of in brief how AI is being used. There are more and more examples coming about how AI is being used to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that we learned about the opportunities and the benefits of AI, it will be remiss on my part not to highlight the challenges, because we are very early in terms of how AI is being used in healthcare. There's still a long way before AI can be part of the regular healthcare delivery. Why is that so? So we had to take into account the challenges of AI. So one big challenge is the ethical challenge. So we learned earlier that data is necessary to train AI models, machine learning models. In case we have non-representational data or incomplete data, it's very easy to introduce biases or reinforce biases. For example, in the US, it has been identified certain AI models have been discriminated against minorities. So that could happen any part of the world. If we don't have appropriate data and we train the machine learning model on that inappropriate data, we could either reinforce biases or introduce biases. So that could also lead to discrimination against particular communities. The other issue that I've highlighted earlier is that within deep learning, we have those hidden layers which lend to the opacity of the AI model. We can't decipher the decision-making process. This becomes problematic in medicine. In medicine, we have to be open and transparent as to why we are making a particular decision, in a clinical decision. And if an AI model is used to substitute a doctor or used to augment a doctor, and it can't explain the decision-making process, it becomes a challenge. So the other challenges in quick are that as AI models get better, it's possible that hospitals and doctors become so reliant on AI models and they leave all the decision-making to the AI models. And that could present problems. It won't be a problem when things are all right, but when things go wrong, that could become a problem. The other challenges in quick, regulatory challenges. Aside from the US and the UK, which are leading in the world in terms of making changes or introducing policies and frameworks to regulate AI, even then, they're not completely perfect, they're still developing. Many parts of the world are still to figure out how to regulate AI. Why is that important? It's important because we need to ensure that AI in clinical care delivery is safe and of good quality. For that, we need to have appropriate regulatory frameworks. And that's something which countries are grappling with and trying to work around. So still those challenges remain. The other challenges is medico-legal challenge. What happens if something goes wrong? What if a patient dies or there's an adverse event? So who becomes responsible? Is it the physician? Is it the software vendor? Or is it the hospital that is using the AI software? So those kind of medical legal things are yet to be addressed or yet to be clearly specified. So that's something we have to still work on. To address all those challenges, myself and my co-authors, we published in a major health informatics journal a governance framework to mitigate those challenges. So that governance framework is quite in depth. I encourage you to go and read the article because I wouldn't be able to cover all the details, but I would like to highlight the 4 components of that governance model, which is fairness, transparency, trustworthiness, and accountability. What do I mean by fairness? In terms of fairness, we advocate for data governance panels to include not just the software vendors or people in-house within the software company, but also invite the beneficiaries and also the end users like clinicians and patients to be part of the data governance structures. So what this means is they will ensure that appropriate data is used and will benefit the end user. In terms of transparency, we learned earlier that deep learning has issues in terms of being able to provide a transparent decision-making process. So in order to mitigate that, we advocate for non-deep learning models to be used in the first place. If those models are not enough, then we ask for deep learning model to be used. And if deep learning models are used, we have availability of interpretable frameworks called Lime and Shapley and other kind of interpretable frameworks. They can help, it's partly can help with the unraveling the decision-making process. In terms of trustworthiness, there may be reluctance on part of clinicians to adopt AI, or they may be too trusting of AI. So that's why we want to educate clinicians, managers, and other people who are going to be using AI about what is AI, what are the different types of AI, what are the benefits of AI, what are the challenges of AI. So that education component is really, really important. And the last thing is accountability. We propose a particular medical legal framework as to who can be accountable if things can go wrong. So that was kind of in brief about a governance framework. There is much more detail to that. I encourage you to go and read the article. So now that we discussed the opportunities with AI and the benefits of AI and the challenges with AI, how are we looking in terms of where we are at with current AI technology? In terms of interpretation of medical images, I think we are nearly there that we can start deploying those kind of models into regular clinical care delivery. In fact, some companies like GE Healthcare have already incorporated AI models into their CT machines so that it can augment and enable radiologists in interpreting CT images. Also, I think we are nearly there in terms of using medical chatbots, especially trying to triage patients in the community so that we have less burden on the hospitals. That is possible. In a couple of years, I'm going to be seeing, or we are going to be seeing a lot of clinical decision support systems driven by AI models, but also AI being used in conjunction with telehealth models. Maybe 25 to 30 years from now, we'll start to see autonomous robotic surgery. As I outlined earlier in my presentation, we're already seeing trials of AI being used in terms of minor suturing, but we may be starting to see AI in much more complex surgery. And maybe in 30 years, we are also going to see an AI doctor, maybe not to replace current doctors, human doctors, but to support regular doctors. For all that to occur, we need to address some of the fundamental issues. First, we need to address technological issues. For want of time, I won't go into the mathematical and algebraic limitations of current algorithms, but in order to achieve artificial general intelligence, there are some things that had to be worked in terms of the algorithms. I still think that can be addressed, but there are other issues in terms of infrastructure. In order to run AI models, especially deep learning models, we need appropriate infrastructure like hardware, like GPU machines. Even for that, solutions are starting to emerge. But at this stage, to run medical imaging interpretation software locally, you need GPU machines. So that is not widely available. But also, we don't have widespread use of electronic health records, which is necessary to acquire the data to train the model. So there are a couple of issues in terms of infrastructure too. All this can be addressed, but if you don't have an appropriate policy on part of the government which supports the use of AI, not only the use of AI, but safe and quality use of AI, all these things can unravel. So we need also the authorities to issue relevant policies. And finally, we also need a governance framework which ensures that the patient's interests are protected and no harm comes to the patient. So that's kind of the pathway into how AI can be introduced into healthcare, but also absorbed into healthcare and become a regular part of healthcare. So that kind of comes to the end of the presentation. But if you are interested in AI in healthcare, application in healthcare, please await my academic text, which is coming out in November. It's a book which I've edited with contributions from all across the world, including United States, the United Kingdom, Spain, Chile, Australia, and even India. So that text kind of book is coming out in November. But in case you wanted to start to know about AI in healthcare right away, this book is already available on Amazon. It's pretty written in an easy to read language. It charts the history of AI. How did AI emerge? How did it come into healthcare? And what's the future of healthcare? So with that, I come to the conclusion of my presentation, and I would like to thank you all for your patience in listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Sandeep. I request you to stop sharing your slide. And
Yes.
you have exactly presented for 30 minutes. And I have just 4 questions to be answered by you because it's going to be too late for you to wait for the completion of webinar. I'll straight away request you to answer 4 questions, and then remaining things I'll ask other panelists to answer. The first question is by Srinivas Murthy from Bangalore, physician. He's asking, AI in telemedicine, can it be effectively used in teleconsultations?
Certainly, at this stage, I think it's a bit premature to completely associate AI with telehealth, because there are certain infrastructural issues that had to be addressed in terms of telehealth, including video latencies, broadband infrastructure, and so forth. But if you were to hypothetically consider that telehealth infrastructure issues have been addressed and everything is going very well, we can potentially start to see the use of machine learning algorithms to remotely manage patients. For example, remote management of cardiac patients. In that way, we will be able to ensure that overcrowded hospitals and overburdened health services can be relieved of that pressure by having patients being treated at home, but also combining AI and telehealth services with Internet of Things by using sensors in home care in homes. We can also monitor older people, elderly people. So that kind of possibilities of using AI in conjunction with telehealth is always there.
Thank you, Sandeep. There's another question by Dr. Pramod, principal of JSS Pharmacy College, Mysuru, about utility of AI in drug designing.
Yes, certainly. So at this stage, just for drugs from the lab to emerge into the market, it takes about more than 10 years, right? That you are already aware of. So one of the reasons is, first, drugs have to be identified in terms of their molecular structure and then have to be going through clinical trials. So there have been recent scientific studies and developments that have actually accelerated that process. So I think from that regard, there is going to be immense potential in using AI, not just potential, it's already being used. There have been episodes where AI has been identified new drug molecules, but also hasten the process of clinical trials such that the drugs can reach the market faster, but also reduce the costs in terms of identifying drug molecules and introducing them into the market. So that potential is already there.
Thank you, Sandeep. There is another question by anesthesiologist. He's asking, can AI be used in anesthesiology practice in any component of anesthesia practice?
I don't have a specific case study on top of my head, but potentially, yes, it could be used. So wherever there is data that is being collected in terms of medicine and that you require it to be complex data that has to be crunched quickly and has to aid the clinician, it is possible. Yes, it could be used. I know that in the ICU end of things, it's associated with sensors. We can't have ICU physicians being there all the time, or there may be shortage of ICU physicians, but what if we have an AI sensor which can alert the ICU doctors of any critical events and also monitor the ICU patients, it's being used. So you can kind of extrapolate that to anesthetic situations.
Thank you. I think it may help in designing and developing therapeutic algorithms in critical care. I agree with you. Maybe the precision medicine for anesthesiology practice and available option selection, it may help. There's only my imagination. One more question we will answer, and then there are few more there. Employability of healthcare workers. How does AI trained person get an employability? Vice versa, can AI be used for employability component?
Sorry, doctor, I missed that question. Can you repeat that?
The question asked by Nawab Sheikh is employability for healthcare workers who are AI trained, and AI, how it can be used for employment of the employees selection.
Oh, you're talking about human resource selection, so that's a bit outside my expertise. But in terms of healthcare workers or healthcare professionals knowing AI, I think there's been an adage that is going around, which is really nicely kind of summarizes what I would like to say. AI won't replace doctors or AI won't replace healthcare workers, but it will replace those doctors who do not know about AI. So in the future, I think it will become very imperative upon all healthcare professionals to know about AI. So it's very likely that we will need healthcare professionals to be aware of the AI. When I talk about knowing about AI, they don't need to become machine learning scientists or data engineers. They need to know about what is AI, the nuances of AI, the different types of AI, what are the benefits of AI, how AI can be used in healthcare.
Thank you, Sandeep. There is an interesting question. Will AI make a healthcare delivery costlier or economical?
My personal opinion is it will make it much cheaper. When you look at the number of years it takes to train doctors and then for them to become medical specialists, for the matter, not just doctors, any other healthcare professionals, whether it's nurses or allied health workers, it takes a long time. But also look at the shortage of doctors and the amount of time it takes to recruit those doctors, recruit the healthcare professionals, but also the infrastructure that is required to deliver current care models. But then you think about computers, they do not sleep, they do not take leave. They are, once you train an AI model through the process of transfer learning, you can use it in different situations. When you consider all of that, I think there is definitely potential to reduce, not only reduce the cost of healthcare, but also standardize healthcare. We all know that because of the variability of healthcare, medical errors can be introduced. Because of that standardization process, also the quality of healthcare can be improved.
Thank you, Sandeep. There are several questions. I don't think we can take up them because there are 3 more speakers to make their presentation. I thank you so much for taking time off and making your contribution and for the assigned topic. And my last question is, can AI be misutilized by techies to diagnose themselves and medicate themselves?
That is always a danger with any technology of inappropriate use. I think there has to be a human in the loop. That's what is becoming very, very important nowadays, is to ensure wherever AI is being used in healthcare, there is a human doctor or a human healthcare professional involved in the final decision-making process. So we need to have some sort of regulatory process that ensures that there is no misuse of or inappropriate use of AI, just like any other technology.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Thanks a lot, and be with us if you can. And then we will move on to the next presentation. Before that, I see our Pro-Chancellor has pitched in now. He was busy with another webinar, and he is the key person who made us to convene this webinar, and he gave us an idea that it's going to be useful. It's advancing the most evolving component in healthcare that we need to understand. I just request him to present his words of wisdom for this webinar.
Thank you, Dr. Basan Godappa, and thank you, Dr. Sandeep Reddy, Vikram Patel, Dr. Krishna, and Dr. Sudha, and all other who have kindly joined in to make this webinar valuable and useful to all concerned. This thought came up to us was we were talking quite a bit about AI in healthcare, and we were talking of progressing in new areas of medical sciences, basically look even beyond the clinicals. Like quite often what happens is when we talk of innovation or we talk of advancing in medical sciences, quite often we look at only the clinical procedures, processes, or at the most the pharmacology, that is the drugs that can influence the care that can be given. Now the world is moving towards a different level where we should be able to predict what can happen and understand what can happen and be ready ahead of this. I think this is where the world is moving, and JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research and JSS Medical College, fortunately, we're collaborating with quite a few different stakeholders across the world, and some of the universities which are extremely advanced in many of these areas which I mentioned. So it was with this idea when I discussed with Dr. BG and also with Dr. Vikram Patil and Dr. Sudha that maybe it may be a new area, it may not be something which everyone would like to catch up immediately and say, yeah, I would like to listen to this, but we have to make a beginning. Let's make a beginning and let's start talking. Even if a few people get to listen and they get motivated in that area, I think then we'll be moving forward further. And that's why this is the first webinar that has taken place in this style. And what we are expecting is many of our young faculty at JSS Academy are quite excited to move forward in these emerging areas, particularly how the medical profession itself is going to change is something which is going to be very new for us. And if we are going to prepare and move forward in that direction, it may be very valuable. One simple example is I was talking to a colleague in UK. He said when before the pandemic was there, when the NHS, the National Health Scheme in UK was trying to talk to the physicians or surgeons, telling about telemedicine and how they can reach out to the patients and try to convince them to move towards telemedicine so their access and reachability can be there and every patient need not come to them and spend time and make medicine more expensive. There was a lot of opposition from the medical fraternity. They said, how is it possible to do care without seeing the patient? So this was the question put by the thing. But as soon as the pandemic came in, the whole medical community shifted and they said, yes, we can do via telemedicine. So this attitude changed because of one single situation. And now what has happened is the medical community there is seeing patients predominantly on, particularly if they are repeat cases or prolonged cases, this do only through the telemedicine. If the prescription goes electronically to the pharmacy, so there is no, again, diversion or intricacies associated with that. So the pharmacy also keeps the prescription of the patient ready and is able to follow up with the patient afterwards, sending the prescription to the patient, the medicines to the patient. So whole dimension changed. This is one small example of what happened because of this pandemic, even in the form of delivering a service. I am sure there are going to be many more such things that are going to be in the future, and it is only right that we think and be prepared for it now. So I congratulate the medical college, the dean, and also the team now at radiology for initiating this new beginning. And I am sure this series which we are trying to build in will bring out all such emerging areas to be placed before the medical community, and we'll be able to move forward. I once again thank Dr. Sandeep Reddy. I know in spite of the busy schedule and time differences, you have joined in for this meeting. And thank you also, Dr. Krishna. And I look forward to a very good, successful evening now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your words of wisdom, and thank you for making us to think about it and executing this webinar. We always continue to require your support and guidance in this kind. Now I request Dr. Sudha Kiran Das, she is our own faculty, assistant professor in radiology, to talk to us on radiology and AI. Is it a hype or a hope? Over to Sudha, please. She has 18 minutes presentation, and we will have quick presentation by Sudha, crisp on AI in radiology, is it a hype or a hope?
Good afternoon to one and all, and it's different times, difficult times, but yet it is a new way of joining together to be able to discuss about the scope of AI in radiology. And as we stand at this juncture, do we consider it as a hype or a hope? Now, as we all know, there's nothing new under the sun, and the concept of artificial intelligence actually came to being in way back in 1918, was used during the times of World War II, that is in 1945, when Professor Turing actually came up with this concept of an electrical brain to decode the cryptographic messages that were across Germany. The World War II was actually fought based on AI. The word AI was actually coined by in 1956, way back in Dartmouth conference. Since then, over the years, AI has seen its ups and downs as opposed to every other innovation and discovery. But contrary to that, in 1997, AI beat Garry Kasparov in chess. After that, you can see the curve has shown a completely upward trend. This is also because new funding and innovation, technological advancement, data storage, improved software capabilities actually played a huge role in bringing AI back into focus. The road traveled thus far, our experience over the last 20 years has been awkward. There have been error-filled systems, making it the perception of excellence was actually not the outcome. There was a significant mismatch. The end user always felt that which is artificially produced is somehow false and an inferior kind of intelligence. Well, one thing we do know today, that AI is not human, but it is almost there. And it does look as on today that it is going to supersede human intelligence in the domain of cognitive science. The early efforts, however, with AI were subhuman in performance, as you can see through this graph. And as we stand today, in the current state of affairs, we are at the zone of intersection where AI in many areas matches human intelligence and has taken over human intelligence in a few areas. So where do we look for from here? The future outlook does look promising for the AI and is definitely asking for human intelligence to improvise as we also learn with AI. The past, present, and future, how exactly does AI play a role in radiology? As radiologists, we have not been averse to technology way back, starting in 1895, when the first X-ray machines have developed, till date, where we are today in 2020, making diagnosis of COVID-19 through AI. The modalities that are used in radiology all have data, namely radiography, ultrasound, CT or MRI, PET-CT or PET-MRI, or digital subtraction angiography. As you can see in this picture, all the images that are acquired go through a phase of what we call as the pre-processing, and then we have a final image. Now, this image actually goes through three processes. One is being able to detect the abnormality. Second is to characterize the abnormality. And the third, in case a patient has had therapy, is to be able to monitor the therapy. Now, based on this, the image is integrated with all these three aspects, and then we interpret the image and give the final report. The final radiological report, irrespective of the radiology modality, is integrated with clinical scenarios and through laboratory, and finally in terms of outcome. A recap of the glossary that Dr. Sandeep had spoken to us about. Now here we talk of something that is artificial, that is an intelligence that is being made to acquire, is acquired by a machine. Now who makes the machine acquire this? Obviously it is the humans. The machines are taught by the humans, data sets are fed into the machines, and the machines are made to learn and pick up pathologies. Now, this varied aspects of machine learning can be there through classification methods or rule-based engines. The of recent noteworthy is the neural networks that we were talking of in terms of deep learning. Deep learning handles a large amount of data sets, requires GPUs, but the outcomes through deep learning have been way more promising than machine learning that we have been used to over the last years. But why radiology of all the clinical modalities? Why is radiology at the forefront? One of the things is that the specialty of radiology and the number of radiologists that are present is there's a huge demand supply mismatch. We have an average of one radiologist to about 140,000 people across India. But this has not stopped the amount of imaging data that continues to grow at a disproportionate rate. Now consider this, an average radiologist would have looked at any one image for at least 3 to 4 seconds in his 8-hour workday. Fatigue, which is impeded by visual perception, consequently impairs decision making. Errors are inevitable, particularly given the constrained conditions. Just to give you a stat, on an average in 2018, in US, there were 214 million X-rays which were done. This only comprised of about 65% of the total radiology flow through that had happened through that year. Now, this is inhumanly possible for somebody to deal with this kind of imaging load, and as a result of which there were delay in radiology reports, which also told on patient outcare and his care. AI is definitely not good at everything as of yet, but it can definitely help the radiologist help the patient, particularly in being able to handle repetitive routine tasks, like when you have master health checkups and you have a load of normal chest x-rays, which can be run through an artificial intelligence algorithm, and only the abnormal x-rays can be picked up for the radiologist's purview. It can also come up with additional differential diagnosis, ensuring that the radiologist does give a second look at the imaging. It eliminates inter and intra-observer variability. Now, actually, in one of these studies that even Dr. Sandeep had mentioned, about 14 listed conditions can actually be picked up by feeding your chest radiograph into the AI. This is where exactly can AI come into play. If you actually see this, irrespective of the modality, we have something called as a raw scanner data, which comes up to the radiology image and in the radiology report. There are 3 levels in radiology where it can play. One is dealing with the raw scanner data, where it actually can enable and improvise the outcome of the images. Particularly when we're dealing with CT, we also talk in terms of radiation dose. If we can have better image quality with less radiation dose, while AI deals with the raw scanner data, why not? Second is interpretation of the radiology image. If it can act as an aid to the radiologist in dealing with repetitive tasks and cumbersome details, AI is most welcome, even with radiology reporting. Image and radiology reporting, most of it is now currently being also integrated with ultrasound scanners. When as the radiologist does scans, the automatic measurements are taken and imaging, the final radiology report based on the biometric measurements are put out. Now, one thing we need to remember is, whatever be it, it always in terms is the health outcome, that is the ground truth and the ground reality. So optimal health outcomes will always be the marker for the efficacy of AI. Relooking at the same thing as I was talking about AI in obstetric radiology, this is a fetal image where there is automatic nuchal translucency measurement, which normally would take a radiologist quite a bit of time. Having this integrated into the mission improves the throughput. Dealing with raw scanner data, improvising on MR image quality with shorter scan times is appreciable even by the patients who are particularly claustrophobic and also by the institutes. There are 3 areas which as of now are the gaps. One is dealing with the raw scanner data to the radiology report. This is where many of the radiologists are wary about handing over the raw scanner data to the convolutional neural networks, with the issue of, can the data be manipulated? Can there be errors which the radiologist may not perceive? In sense that if it is a normal chest image, and if while being extrapolating, if through the deep learning process any abnormality is introduced, a radiologist will not be able to perceive it as an abnormality secondary to an artifact. Second area, which is a knowledge gap, is the radiology image to the paths report, and the third being with regard to the health outcomes in terms of Can AI predict the health outcome in a patient? For example, if AI detects a patient to have a hepatic malignancy or a cancer, can the AI tell which therapeutic algorithm needs to be followed and what the patient outcomes are? These three areas are still in the process of innovation. This is just a video of how AI actually goes in work. If you actually see this as a tumor in the brain, and this is the imaging, you can actually see AI being able to detect the tumor separate from the peritumoral edema. Accuracy of detection of brain cancer is almost that of humans, 94.6%, marginally higher than humans, which is 93.9%. It is not just in the field of radiographs, as already it has been highlighted, but also in being able to track the fibers that are there in the brain and being able to tell what the surgical outcomes are in a patient. AI also plays a role in improving breast MRI workflow by early detection, pickup, and being able to deal with the amount of images that come. Also, there's one study which has actually put AI versus 101 radiologists and found that AI works almost on par with the radiologists in detection of breast malignancies. This is a picture of an AI. This actually has to be picked up. This is a dense breast where a radiologist is impeded being able to pick up a lesion, whereas AI beautifully picks up and highlights the lesion. This also can be used as an aid for biopsies. It is not only in terms of diagnostics, but also in terms of evaluating the therapeutics. And like I said, if fed with the raw scanner data, can improve image quality. Now, this is a recent study which is still under research is going on, where AI is trying to pick up an area which is precancerous. Now, this is something which is nearly impossible for a radiologist to do. AI has played a role, particularly in times of stay home, stay safe. The number of doctors being available has been very restricted. AI has actually come to play in being able to pick up COVID scans, being able to predict whether the disease is moderate or severe. And also they have tried to predict if this patient would require a ventilator. Now, these are all in the phase of studies. Now, one of the things that comes to us as clinicians, not just radiologists, is the change. Can we wish it away? Well, where we stand, AI has actually come into our lives significantly in various aspects, less known to us. It is there and it is going to be staying. But there are certain challenges of AI in radiology, mainly in terms of quality label data, because this is essential to be able to teach the machine to pick up a pathology. Second is to deal with the 3D reality. Third, which is most important, is a non-standardized image acquisition. Different institutes have different methodology of image acquisitions and storage. So this actually becomes difficult when it actually comes to dealing with data. Smooth user experience is another hindrance. Performance metrics of AI is still in the disputable range. And most important is the user's trust. Can we rely on the diagnosis that AI provides? Can it misdiagnose? Can there be errors? One thing is, now we talked about machine learning. We have to teach the machine to actually be of any aid to us. That is, unless we aid, we cannot expect it to aid us in any way, given the fact that there is huge volume of medical data out there. There is delay in implementation of treatment owing to delayed reports reaching. Definitely, if we can actually play hand in assist AI, and AI in turn assists us, and also we need to be abreast with not just the advantages, but also the potential risks and pitfalls that can occur when we integrate AI into our imaging stream. Radiology at JSS, it's a full-fledged department. We have DR, ultrasound, CT, MRI, DSA, authentic raw data. Data storage is excellent with PACS. We have easy access to data retrieval from storage, and there is a humongous opportunity for groundbreaking research. In closing, I would just like to say this. Healthcare has moved from volume to value, from that which is system dependent on missions to system that is dependent on how mission communicates. It's time to leverage AI to shape the future of not just radiology, but healthcare as a whole. Now, will it overtake a radiologist's job, or will it obviate the need of a clinician? The simple answer being no. It will not take over healthcare as a whole. Doctors are here meant to stay. But yes, our pattern of job is bound to change. It is still the man behind the mission who matters. Hype or not, AI is the next frontier for software innovation and application. Definitely potential yet to be tapped. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudha, for an excellent presentation. Crisply, you have covered the role of AI in radiology. You have given hopes that it will help in the present scenario where we have deficiency of radiologists to interpret the images. The AI will definitely come into play a role. It can be used for anybody and everybody at the across the globe. Whereas hype is that it is going to replace radiologists. It cannot. So we will take up the questions related to her presentation a little later. Now I have a pleasure to request Dr. Vikram Patil, who actually got involved in designing this program with the help of our Pro-Chancellor and Vice-Chancellor. Now he will be talking to us on what is the role of AI in health education. As I mentioned in the very beginning, everyone, starting from the students now to the educators and the industry and research, everybody should understand the applicability of AI in healthcare. So he is going to talk to us the realities of what is the reality of bench to bedside in terms of health education application of AI. Dr. Vikram Patil is a assistant professor in radiology, and he has designed this program. I request him to go ahead and make his presentation.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. We have heard two excellent sessions on AI in healthcare and AI in radiology. Now we look at what AI has for health education or health universities in general. When we talk of education in health universities, we actually look at three components. It's not just health education. We look at hospitals and data, and at the research components. Now, from henceforth, here onwards, I'll start discussing, considering JSS as a case model, which will be applicable to any other health university. So when we talk about health education, the first domain that we need to address, we initially started off with regular formal lectures or seminars or lab-based investigations, or more so bedside clinics where students came to the bedside and discussed along with the clinician. Then we moved to the era where we started our online case-based learning. You can see a snapshot of a radiology educational website, which was designed by JSS. And also we see a snapshot of a digital journal of clinical medicine. Here, clinical cases are discussed in a website manner. So we moved from bedside clinics to website clinics. So that was how the evolution began. Then JSS decided to have its own center for online learning and a center for distance education, where students can learn anywhere, anytime, and whatever course they would choose to. Then came an era of augmented reality, where students started learning through augmented imaging. Recently, we established in the era of virtual reality, where JSS established a state-of-the-art simulation center. It is established in 12,000 square feet, spending around 22 crores. And it has facilities where students can start learning by a virtual simulation and looking at trying to address the cases on a virtual manner. So the evolution of medicine, as we know, has been from apprenticeship through formal lectures, and now we are at technology-enhanced education. But still, we were at crossroads. Medicine is seeing in some direction, computer science in some other direction, and biotechnology in some other direction. And suddenly we see a new kid has come in the block. It's machine learning and artificial intelligence. So we are in a dilemma whether to adopt to artificial intelligence or not, to stick to human intelligence, to adopt to artificial intelligence, or we have to make a balance between the two. When we see these news articles like Japanese company replaces office workers with artificial intelligence, or Microsoft sacks journalists to replace them with robots, we see there is no choice but to bring artificial intelligence into medicine. So JSS decided to have its own Center for Artificial Intelligence. Around 1 year back, JSS established its own Center for Artificial Intelligence in Health Sciences. And slowly, we began adopting to artificial intelligence in healthcare. We had Dr. C. Bernard Coombs, who is the Vice President of East Virginia Medical Schools. He visited us and he discussed with our faculty and students about how to adopt to AI in healthcare and how to imagine the healthcare in the era of AI. We had workshops conducted for electronic health records, mainly to standardize our health records and see the way ahead is standard health records. Then we had Mr. Gaur Sundar, who is the Joint Director of NRCS and also a member of the National Digital Health Mission of India. He came and told us what is the government of India looking at AI and digital health and what is the prospect of it. So what are the proposed academics that we are looking right now is, we're looking at offering electives for MBBS students in artificial intelligence in healthcare and medical informatics. And also we are planning to offer certificate programs in artificial intelligence and machine learning in healthcare and healthcare information technology. Also, we would like to continue our education and training through clinical research fellowships, data science internships, medical AI internships, and regular symposiums and conferences. So what is the advantage of coming to JSS Asia than going to some other institute for research is, we have not just a medical college here, we have medical, dental, pharmacy, biomedical science, life science, natural sciences like yoga and management studies, everything under one roof. And also what we look at is quality. Whichever rankings you look at, Times Higher Education ranking, IGOS ranking, KSRFU, QS rankings, or the recently conducted NIRF rankings, not only the university, all its constituent colleges have been doing extremely well. So the next component that we look in education in health universities is hospitals and data. So JSS Hospital boasts of a 1,800 bedded tertiary care hospital, which is NABH accredited. That again means quality in data, quality in the care. Also, JSS group of institutions has a Ayurveda college, a naturopathy and college, a college of physiotherapy, a college of speech and hearing associated with it. So these all would add to the transdisciplinary approach of any research. JSS Hospital has services right from the most basic department to all the super specialty departments that are available, and also the best of the state-of-the-art laboratory and radiology investigations. Apart from the tertiary care setup, JSS also boasts of a secondary care hospital in Chamarajanagar and a primary care center in Suttur. So what it gives for research in JSS is, we can evaluate from a primary setup to a secondary setup to a tertiary setup, how the care can be applied through AI. We recently saw two major retractions in the history of publications. There was an article which was retracted from Lancet and one more in New England Journal of Medicine. Both of these retractions were due to the poor quality of the data. So source and reliability of data becomes a big question while doing any research. And even the Harvard Business Review recently said the future of AI will be about less data and not more. So what we want is quality data, reliable data. So to address this, JSS has designed its data sharing policy, which has been designed in consultation with senior IT professionals and looking into the Government of India guidelines, especially the Personal Data Protection Act, the DISHA Act, and it will be updated regularly as per Government of India directives. So next we enter into the third component, that is research in health. So when we look at research in health in universities, we look at international grants which are available in plenty for AI related research. This is an ongoing grant which is available, which is the India-Sweden grant, which is for artificial intelligence for advancing healthcare across India and Sweden. Also, there are plenty of other grants like the European Horizon grant, the NIHR grant, and the Innovation Challenge Fund 2020, which is actually available specifically for Karnataka. This has been paused, unfortunately, due to the COVID situation right now. But there are plenty of such international grants available for AI. And so are there many national grants, right from DST to ICMR to DBT to BIRAC. Everybody offers grants for artificial intelligence and health healthcare. And even the government of India, through its NITI Aayog, has set up a national strategy for artificial intelligence, which says AI for all. And the primary focus area is healthcare, even in that strategy. So what is the advantage of healthcare research in a healthcare university is we do a need assessment for you. When a health data is available, we have an inter and a transdisciplinary approach, grants which can be jointly written. And once a product is developed, the most important part of any product is validation. That is, unless a product is validated, it cannot be used. So that can be easily done. So these are some of the potential areas of research at JSS, right, from radiology, pathology, cardiology, dermatology, to even medical devices. I'll just be elaborating on few of them. So in radiology, already it has been discussed elaborately. So I just tell we are already partnering with IMERA in developing intelligent medical radiograph analysis, and also with NASA MedTech for developing an innovative treatment for fibroids. We have been approached by AI Nest to validate their product on quick scan MRIs. And as already mentioned, we have 128 slice CT, 3 Tesla MRI, and digital radiographs, and a good pack system, which will give us for a lot of potential. The next area of potential is pathology, where oncopathology is a huge area. And we have been recently approached for the Vinnova project through Karolinska University Institute in Sweden for work on digitization of pathology through artificial intelligence. And also St. George's University has approached us to look into breast cancer imaging. And even NITI Aayog in its report has very clearly mentioned that the deficiency of oncopathologists, and that's the need of the hour. Cardiology has been an emerging area in artificial intelligence, right from precision medicine to wearable devices. So, and JSS in its own way has been contributing in artificial intelligence in cardiology. This is a publication, now the series of publications that is going on through JSS, the advent of artificial intelligence in cardiology, the current applications and future prospects, which is authored by faculty of JSS. Ophthalmology has already been told by Dr. Sandeep, is an established and FDA approved, has already been given for especially diabetic retinopathy. Apart from this, there is a lot of scope in cataract surgery or geographical atrophy or hereditary disorders. And so JSS ophthalmology department has also been contributing in its own way in these areas as well. Skin cancer is one more area which can easily be assessed by artificial intelligence because of its patterned approach, which can be used to distinguish between normal and abnormal. And there are companies like Molescope which have come up with devices based on artificial intelligence to detect the skin cancers. And JSS with Dr. Bedkuru as the president of the Indian Dermatology Association could be a main man behind dermatology and AI research at JSS. ICU settings, intelligent ICU for autonomous patient monitoring using pervasive sensing and deep learning has been always being assessed, and it has a huge potential because it needs continuous monitoring in the ICUs. And also it gives us prediction of ventricular arrhythmias, cardiac arrest prediction accuracy. A lot of huge number of publications are coming in the critical care medicines journals. And JSS boasts of around 260 beds in the ICUs, in all the ICUs, so which will be of huge potential for research in ICU settings. Oncology, we all know, has been an established area of AI research, right from Watson introduced the models, and all the omics data, right from genomics to epigenomics to proteomics and metabolics, have been a significant area to develop precision medicine, where we know a particular drug would be useful for a particular mutation, may not be useful for the other mutation. So such things can be easily predicted by artificial intelligence, and JSS has been playing its own role through protein modeling and drug design using computational tools. Mental health has gained a significant importance of late, and we know that there are chatbots like Go chatbot, which gives continuous support through artificial intelligence. And also recently we have seen that film actor Sushant Singh committed suicide, and this could have been prevented. And these can be done through AI-based modules. utility of artificial intelligence in suicide risk prediction and suicidal behaviors is a very, very upcoming branch. And JSS-AHR has the JSS Department of Psychiatry is one of the potential areas because it's already working on multinational ICMR and DBT grants, almost 15 million rupees of grants along in it, around 200 publications or more. And there is a dedicated suicide prevention wing here at JSS. Genetics, we know genetics and artificial intelligence is going to be in the era of precision medicine, a significant role. And companies like Sophia already established themselves to genomics and artificial intelligence. JSS, part of Organization for Rare Disease in India, and it's also collaboration with Genetic Medicine Foundation of UK has been playing its own role and is trying to update the genetics field. Nanotechnology is again going to be a huge area with the precision medicine. Nanotechnology, nanomedicine, and AI are going to change the healthcare revolution of India. And JSS has its own nanotechnology department and a MSc in molecular biology, which could potentiate for research in AI. COVID gave a new dimension to research and AI. We know that there are plenty of grants which came up right from Microsoft giving $20 million. So we could see that there was a prediction on epidemiology of how AI is going to progress to testing with robotics. And JSS has been a part of everything in its process. We have from JSS collaborated with JSS Technology University, Noida, for grants on AI-related research and yoga therapy, whether it can be beneficial. And also, there have been ICMR and NIMS-related projects which have come to us, and JSS has been contributing and looking at how the pandemic can be prevented and what is the strategy as a healthcare university we need to adopt. Dentistry, we know, is going to again be an area because of its image, which is two-dimensional. These are the images which actually give an easier method of learning for artificial intelligence. So quality of dental care is going to change with AI. Monitoring and wearable devices with blockchain and artificial intelligence are going to change the face of healthcare, especially in neonatal care and maternal care, where continuous monitoring is required, especially with premature babies. And JSS, we are in discussion with a company called NemoCare to develop any innovative solutions for newborn and maternal care, and research funds, we are working towards a research grants as well. 3D printing is going to be the future of the medical era, with dental 3D printing already an established field. Already dentists using a lot of 3D printing, and even JSS dental departments are using 3D printing for implants. Soon we'll be having implants or customized processes for casts, and also customized processes which will be 3D printed. And JSS has been playing its role in bioprinting in life sciences and other areas of 3D printing. Telemedicine, with the government of India giving a green signal and government of MCI giving clean-cut guidelines for telemedicine, there has been a scope for AI in telemedicine. And there are companies which have come up with various solutions based on telemedicine. But there is a catch here. The government of India in its guidelines has very clearly told that AI can be used for diagnosing and assisting in telemedicine, but it cannot prescribe the telemedicine as it can be used as a prescription tool. Drug discovery is an area which will again add to the artificial intelligence and precision medicine. So JSS pharmacy colleges in Ooty and Mysuru are well renowned, with standing in 9th and 10th rank in India, and they can contribute to a huge amount of potential in drug discovery and artificial intelligence. Medical devices has been approved by FDA to use artificial intelligence in medical devices, and these are very two important reads, especially medical devices in 2025 and AI impact analysis and medical robotics. These give us an analysis of how the era of artificial intelligence is going to change the medical device industry totally. JSS-CHR has been contributing in its own way through medical devices by low-cost ICUs to low-cost ventilators to mobile ICUs to handheld sanitizers to various other innovations in the field of medical devices. JSS doesn't just look at science. We have been looking at beyond boundaries, and there is a scope for intellectual property rights is being addressed. There is business modules which are being taught, and also JSS has established a Sparkle Cine Foundation where it empowers entrepreneurship and innovation and entrepreneurship. And there are a lot of outreach activities which keep on going on regularly at JSS. So what we would say then is definitely artificial intelligence is going to come, but it's going to enhance and not replace. An AI clinician will be much better than a clinician who is not using AI. So we started off saying education in health universities is 3 components: education, hospitals, data, and research. We want to make this research into translational research. And to that, we need collaboration between industries and healthcare universities. And the government of India, through its Atal Innovation Mission, Niti Aayog has told work for India to make it more transformational research and entrepreneurship to come into India. And JSS also has a similar vision through its Innovation Vision 2020 has been asking us to work for India. So translational research is going to make us self-reliant. And what is the Government of India initiative right now? It's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Welcome to the future. Thank you. If you have any queries, you can make.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vikram Patil, that you have taken through all possible nooks and corners of possible application of AI in health education, starting from oncology to variety of medical practices, and ultimately landing up with creating in India, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat. Let us hope that will happen, and our people in the technological systems will be given by the technology institutes to healthcare industry in collaboration. Let us move to utilize AI optimally to create a more useful application of healthcare delivery through the technology. Thank you so much. I think there are quite a few questions we are getting propped up. I will only request the last speaker, the most important speaker for us from UK, London, who is just waiting there, Krishna Boddu, who is CEO of Imera. His partner was our alumni, and we are already working with them. And he's going to tell us the challenges that industry is going to face. What are the opportunities and what are the challenges in terms of AI application, in terms of healthcare industry. So over to Dr. Krishna for his presentation, and we'll take up the question answer soon after his presentation.
Great, thank you very much. I really enjoyed all the talks of esteemed panelists. It's a great morning for me here. Yeah, so I'll try to share my. It has been a privilege to join in this esteemed panel. Myself, I think you have introduced already. By heart, I'm an orthopedic surgeon working in London in King's College Trust. But I'm also a CEO of a startup, Imera.ai, and we are really privileged to collaborate with you for the last 1 year. We have done a remarkable work. We are quite happy with the progress. So let me crack on with my take. Here, I would like to present the perspective from the healthcare industry rather than from the clinician's perspective, so that actually the clinicians can get a full picture of where we are and what we can achieve given the resources we have. This is probably, I think everyone has touched this bit. The guy here on this slide is Jeff Hinton. He is the father of artificial intelligence, and he designed the neural networks about 30 years ago. In 2016, he predicted that we don't need any more radiologists, and we are at 2020. And the radiologist numbers are going up and up, and the demand is going up and up as well. I think the crux of the earlier talks was simply AI is not going to replace the doctors, it's going to augment the doctors. And that has been well said, well presented in the previous talks. I don't want to hop more on that. So essentially, AI is nothing but another tool. I usually say AI is not even intelligence. Don't even consider that as an intelligent tool. It's just a software algorithm which is with you to help you to achieve your goals. And why do we need AI in healthcare? I think earlier speakers, and mainly Sandeep, has been very clear about this, and he delineated and briefed about all the different areas where we can use the AI. But from the industry's point of view, industry try to present it as a cost saver. And this is a report from PwC last year, which predicts that actually AI is going to save the money, about $269 billion annually all over the world by using the AI tools. And if you look at the majority of the cost savings, they are in the service and operations, which is nothing but delivery of the healthcare itself. But at the same time, a large chunk of this cost saving comes from optimizing the risk, more efficient supply chains, and in the marketing and the sales areas. And that also occupies a significant proportion of this cost savings. And at this time, I think I would like to take this opportunity of some earlier question from the audience. Actually, is AI going to really save us money, or is it going to raise the healthcare expenditure? So theoretically speaking, from the industry point of view, we can save lots of money if we implement the AI tools smartly. However, the cost of the healthcare does not depend on these technologies. Technology progresses all the time, it actually produces an opportunity to increase the healthcare cost. But the cost of the healthcare depends on the kind of system in which the healthcare is operating. For example, you have a system, a hyper-incentivized system, where you pay for the services. There is always a chance for over-diagnosis, over-treatment, which keep on increasing the healthcare costs as the technology progresses. Example is America and a predominant part of India as well, as you see. However, if the healthcare system is such that if it is a majority state funded one or other way through the insurances or through hybrid models or through straightforward government funded hospitals, with a per capita expenditure, at the same time maintaining the standards and quality of healthcare as it happens, for example, in the NHS, you can actually use the technology to save the money rather than increasing the cost of the healthcare. And this is a quite important point actually for us clinicians to understand, because we don't normally look at the bigger picture as such. So here, I don't want to really go into the details of all the applications which have been clearly explained, emphasized, and presented in a nice manner by previous speakers. So there are a lot of areas in which AI can play a role. From the clinician point of view, I mean, what you see is it's simply, okay, so we are providing healthcare, and we got the data. So all these clinical activities are generating data as we see, and we can use a machine learning and we can get an output and use it for improving our diagnosis and predictive abilities. Similarly, all the EHR data is going into NLP based AI systems, which will give some output, which can use it for improving our diagnostic abilities and predictive abilities. But unfortunately, the system is not that simple. If we clinicians want to exploit the AI, you need to have a clearly defined AI product. And that product needs to be, has to be a deployable product, and that has to go through different regulatory approvals to find its efficacy. And someone needs to regularly update it and revise it as the data keeps on changing. And it needs to be cost effective, and someone needs to bear the legal liability. And this is not possible for the healthcare providers themselves to do it. And here comes the importance of the healthcare industry. So industry needs to produce these products and supply it to such that the AI tools can be effectively used by the healthcare providers, which is hospitals. So let's look at the industry. So what kind of industry, healthcare industry we have? So we have on one end of the spectrum, we have startups, budding companies made up of clinicians, entrepreneurs, and data scientists coming together and trying to solve some clinical problems using AI. On the other end, we have a big techs who are actually spearheading the crux of the foundations of the AI, which is the actual mathematical algorithms like Google, IBM, Amazon. And as they have got this power of these state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms, they want to enter into healthcare industry in one or different way. In between, you have data holders, and this is important point actually. Data holders play a great role. Data holders are, for example, the electronic health record companies, PACS companies. PACS is the imaging system which the healthcare providers use to look at the images. So the PACS companies on the insurance part, they hold the data. They are not actually the owners of the data. Owners of the data are still hospitals. However, they hold the data in their own systems. So if you want to, they got a great leverage of this data to produce the AI products, because even if you want to use AI product, you need an integration with this existing data holders infrastructure. So in that sense, they hold the key in connecting the dots. And of course, there are several academic spin-offs, but we have still yet to see good results from these spin-offs. This is a kind of investment which is going on at the moment in AI. This is AI altogether, a recent report by Economist last week. But if you look at the topmost is the autonomous driving. The second is actually the concept drug development. That's where the most of the money is going, because that's where we have the cost savings. Okay, that's the startups landscape. They got several startups across the world. India is also doing extremely well, actually. Companies like Q.AI made a global presence and progress in this area. And the startups are covering all the different domains of AI where you can exploit this technology. Some of these companies you have to be wary of. AI is used to act as the front end. AI has become a face of these companies rather than actually the principal component of the company. Because they use a bit of AI, but then they have got a different kind of business models. So you can't actually, nowadays you can't distinguish an AI company or non-AI company. So any digital health company can be called as an AI company. So we have to be clear about this distinction in that sense. For example, Babylon is actually a UK-based company. Alipasa started here, it went to US as well now, which is mainly an online GP providing platform, which is using AI as well as a tool, as their face to project and expand in the market. And this is the funding which is going into startups, which is going up every year. And obviously, as you see, not all this funding will be effective. For every one success, there will be 10 failures in these startups. And the second kind of industry I have talked earlier that we need to understand is about the data holders, which are the PACS providers and the electronic health record providers. So if you look at the global share, again, major giant companies are actually taking the whole big chunk of this market. So there can be both obstacles and also facilitators for the progress. It works, it's a double-edged sword, because you need them to implement your AI products in the clinical environment. So if they don't allow, you won't be able to. But on the other side, they got every incentive actually to implement these AI products such that they can improve their competitiveness. And finally, as I spoke before, the big techs keeping their eye on this. And this has got a huge ethical implementation from the business point of view, the monopolization of the industry, which can actually kill the competition and reduce or slow down the progress. And secondly, the ethical issues of data sharing, these being the global companies with access to, which can have access to the healthcare providers across the world. And obviously, we know what happened with the Facebook in terms of Cambridge Analytica and so on. So how they're going to use this data, and that's the most important thing. Now, coming back actually, so which companies are, which kind of companies are going to go, do most impact in AI? We are always been told the necessity is the mother of invention actually, but in fact, creativity is more important than the necessity, and the creativity comes from the passion. So we need a passionate entrepreneurs, passionate data scientists, and passionate clinicians to drive this innovation. It's not the resources, it's not the desperate need which actually will create the new solutions. It's the passion from the entrepreneurs, clinicians, data scientists sitting together and creating solutions, and that's what we need. And so, as I see in the JSS academic institutes, there are thousands of students there, hundreds of them are watching, and this is the opportunity for you guys to understand this and then try to do as much to learn and contribute. In terms of the industry, the motives are clear. Is there a business case? Is there a return on the investment? Because producing these AI products actually is expensive. And also, some of the giant techs actually, they look for the soft power. So they produce AI products. They may not be actually producing any profits for them, but they use them actually as their face, as I already explained before. The best example is actually Google, as Sandeep has mentioned before. Google's fundoscope pictures, they can differentiate a female and male, but what are you going to do with that? But this made the international headlines actually. Google's fundoscope pictures, AI algorithm can differentiate, they can actually pick up the gender. So the clinical utility is the most important thing, rather than what the AI tool is actually doing in the lab. And also most important thing is life cycle. How long it's going to take to make a product. And that at least takes 3 to 4 years in the current circumstances. From making collaborations, curating the data, processing the data, making the product, getting the regulatory approvals, and releasing it to market, and doing the post-product surveillance, and publishing the results, and constantly improving your product. And all this is a part of the life cycle, which takes about 3 to 4 years. For the investors, what they want is return on investment and exit strategies. So you can't, without a business case, you can't develop an AI tool, and that's the most important thing we need to keep in mind. However, there are some exceptions. I'll come to that later. Now, as you see, the healthcare industry's take and the clinicians take. Clinicians want simple, quick solutions to use the AI tool right now on the table. But the healthcare industry faces all these challenges in developing the products and putting them into the market. And the most important thing is to connecting these two dots. So you need a clear and robust collaboration between the clinical entities and the healthcare industry to make this success. And as I said before, let's look at some of the challenges. As I said before, AI is quite stupid in a sense because it does a kind of rote learning. It looks at millions of examples and picks up patterns. Only thing it does is it does things faster than us. That's why humans take maybe 10 images to learn what is a fracture in an X-ray, but the AI actually needs some 10,000 images actually to pick up what is a fracture, because it doesn't know what bone is. It doesn't know what a break is. So it's just a mathematical algorithm which is actually trying to improve with time. The only advantage AI has got is a fast-paced computers which use the repetitive cycles of what we call epochs actually in training, and thereby you achieve that kind of accuracy. But at the same time, is it picking the right patterns? Because it can come to right conclusions, but by picking the wrong patterns. And that's the most important problem with the AI technically. And this is important both for clinicians to understand and the industry to understand as well. This is what we call a black box issue. Best example is this, where AI tool successfully differentiated between dogs and wolves. Unfortunately, when it has been dissected further, it actually picked up the background. And if the background is snowy, it said it is a wolf, and the background is non-snowy, it said it's a dog. So it's actually cheated. In other words, it actually picked up a wrong pattern, but come to the right conclusion. The same thing happens in medicine quite often. Hip fractures are picked up or foreign bodies can be picked up by the pointers. Similarly, pneumothorax is picked up by looking at the chest drain rather than actually the air in the lungs. So these important things we need to be clear. So for these things to be clear, the industry need to come up with a transparency of the data collection, how they use the data, and how they use how they develop the product in decision making using this data. And also there should be certain element of explainability, and this is actually developing quite a bit lately at a technical level. However, a clinician's input is also needed actually for the product to show up or demonstrate the explainability. And the third important factor here is the probability, which is actually how certain your decisions are. At the moment, technically speaking, the products will give you some kind of probability scores, which are not actually a real life probability scores. And these need to be sorted out actually when we use these products. And then, of course, we got the other major challenges, such as protecting patients' data, which has been clearly described by Dr. Patil and Dr. Reddy, the robust governance mechanisms which are important to protect the patient's data. At the same time, I feel healthcare providers have got also a responsibility to utilize this massive data beyond the clinical use to develop solutions for the real world. And in that sense, I think the JS is doing a fantastic job by spearheading this AI movement. Now, the other major challenge with the developing AI products is, as we say, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. We got data everywhere, but not a bite to make a proper useful product, because data is in silos. Silos means you got a protected systems of EHRs, electronic health records, you got a PACS, you got a pathology, you got multiple records within a same hospital. At the same time, multiple companies providing these EHRs to multiple hospitals. So one hospital doesn't talk to another hospital in terms of the data. So you got the interoperability problems. And obviously the regulatory and ethical issues before curating or obtaining this data to develop the product. And all these issues will affect the implementing the product as well, because to implement, you have to integrate with the existing software. And that is a major issue for the AI products at the moment. And finally, the generalizability. Generalizability is if I use a particular set of data and develop this product, which is working very well, say, to predict a pneumonia, will this work in another set of data in another country and another population? And finally, as I said, the business case. So when we entered this AI revolution 4 years ago, we thought the left side of the picture was how it is. It's so simple. You put the data, the machine learns, you get the output out, and let's put this in the real life environment and use this data for improving patient benefits. But we are at the right side now. So we have several challenges here, but we can only overcome these when we understand these challenges deeply. And a few more challenges I have listed. Obviously, I don't have much time to go through all these areas. And as I said, so one is a retrospective. We develop products using retrospective data, but will this be good enough for the prospective usage? Because what happens is you have something called data shift. The data keeps changing because the way we enter the data change, the demographics of the patients. For example, say the patients of the population is getting fatter and fatter, obese and obese, then the new data may not be relevant actually for for the products which has been developed by retrospective data of last, say, 20 years, because the next 5 years, the patients develop a new demographics, new parameters. So all these problems need to be understood. Comparisons are becoming difficult from one product to other product because the different kind of data they use, different algorithms they use. It's very difficult to keep up to date with the constantly changing state of the art and machine learning. So that actually, if this needs to be implemented within the product itself, is going to be very challenging from the industry point of view. And similarly, algorithmic bias, Sandeep has described this adversarial attack, which is, as we have seen, the systems can be vulnerable for cyber attacks. And finally, human barriers. How we are going to use, first of all, from the clinician's perspective, are they okay to accept it? And are there any barriers in actually using it? Okay, if it needs a few more clicks, a few more data entry to use this tool, it may not be useful in the real clinical environment. And finally, I just kept it for final, which is actually the clinical outcomes through randomized controlled trials. At the moment, we check the accuracy of these products by looking at the sensitivity, specificity, predictive values, or receiver operating curves. All these are well and good. But when you use this product in the real life, is it changing the clinical outcomes of the patient? And that, if it's done in a randomized control manner, then that's a type 1 and the pinnacle of the gold standard evidence in medicine. And that AI products need to produce, which is completely lacking at the moment. So the solutions are, as we are doing now, we are a part of the solution now. We are in this webinar. And this is the step 1. And we are here motivating hundreds of people across. We need a stronger collaborations. We have to streamline the processes. We have to improve the interoperability of EHRs, which actually Vikram has described before in his Columbia University collaboration. And also, we need to improve the business structures of these AI products. Some of these AI products are actually part of bigger products. For example, the segmentation algorithms, which Dr. Sudha Das has shown. But look at this, the third bit here. We can also have a custom-made local solutions which are good for this local hospital or university. And here, we can have a greater cooperation is possible between industry and the healthcare providers. Here, we're not looking at an AI product which goes into wider world and is applicable everywhere, but actually a product which is applicable only to your hospital, which developed in a lean way with a minimal funding possible with collaboration with industry. And these are the things actually which we should be looking at, because the generalizability is a major issue in AI. So that's one model I think I'm quite hopeful that slowly will pick up. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Krishna, for an excellent presentation, and you have told us what are the challenges right now, and you have also given some solutions, and you also mentioned the opportunities ahead for learning and adopting AI in healthcare. I thank all the speakers because they have maintained the time so well. We started on dot at 3 o'clock and we were supposed to end by 5:05. We ended at 5:10 because we took away about 5 to 10 minutes of time for question answer for the first speaker, Sandeep, who possibly it is at 10:30 at Australia now. He has logged off and he has answered the questions in the chat box and logged off. We will quickly take up a few question answers, and then I'll leave it to Dr. Kushalappa to make his conclusion and comments. A question to Dr. Vikram Patil by somebody, Dr. Shekhar from Mysuru has asked that is in medical college, medical education is replaced by health education. What are the differences? Will there be a paradigm shift due to AI in health education pattern? What's your answer, Dr. Vikram?
Thank you, sir. There will not be a significant paradigm shift, but definitely the way how medical education is taught will change with the advent of AI, and AI and technology will definitely be a part of medical education henceforth, and the students and the teachers will have to learn to adapt and teach artificial intelligence as a part of medical healthcare delivery, and also a holistic approach would be required for this in the education system.
Krishna, Dr. Krishna, can you add something to that?
I think it's quite important. In fact, we had this discussion last year in our British Orthopedic Association meeting as well, to include AI a part of the curriculum, not just for medical students at the higher training level as well. And we are actually moving into the direction. Digital health is also already a part of the curriculum, and in which they are actually adding up AI elements as well. This is not to extend actually to know the coding and do the stuff and everything, but just to understand the basic foundational concepts and how you can adopt them and utilize them in your clinical practice.
Thank you, Krishna. I think already there is an existing distinct differences the way we teach in India in medical colleges the health education versus what's happening in America or UK or other countries. But the introduction of AI in terms of skill transfer and skill learning and application of AI for diagnostic assistance will definitely become uniform, and that will narrow the differences in the pattern of medical education in the next decade, I suppose. The next question is to Dr. Krishna by Sudha herself has asked you, can AI turn rogue? Will over-dependence on this will lead to manipulated data? What's your answer there?
AI turn rogue. I mean, the question is, I think probably it can be split into two ways actually. So one is actually, are we talking about AGI? AGI is different from the AI we are talking. We are talking about a narrow AI, which takes the data, spits out an output based on the learning. AGI is the artificial general intelligence, which Sandeep has actually briefly explained in his talk. AGI is developing the actual intelligence itself, which here actually becomes, it becomes even quite difficult to understand actually what intelligence is. Does it need understanding, like how we do, how humans do? And we are far, far away from AGI. AGI is, if you ask the experts in the AGIs themselves, actually, the range they're giving is from 40 to 100 years before you're achieving AGI. Or actually, some people say we may never achieve AGI. For AGI, you need a human model. And that is humans world model. And that is impossible to develop with a given architecture. So in that sense, the algorithm itself will not go rogue. Algorithm is just a piece of software, just like any other piece of software we use in the computers. Okay. But however, because it may actually keep its original biases because of how the algorithm has been trained, and so it may give a wrong results, which is very possible. But the algorithm turning rogue, I think it won't happen in our lifetime, gladly.
Krishna, there is a question which I request Vikram to read out.
Dr. Krishna, there's a question. It says, can Google become an example of artificial intelligence where patients can feed symptoms and get differential diagnosis, and patients are treating themselves as Google doctors?
Well, I mean, if you expand the definition of AI, you can include, because Google search engine was there before the AI itself. So it doesn't per se use AI. Actually, it uses actually the semantic knowledge. Actually, there is a big shift nowadays actually to develop a different kind of AI which uses logic as well. The current narrow AI does not use any logic. It's a very crude algorithm, but it's a robust and powerful algorithm which develops its own logic, which can be wrong. Whereas the Google search engine is a logic-based search engine. So there is a more of the computer software engine is driven logic behind the search engine rather than AI actually. So now the hybrid AI is where we are going to include logic as well within this AI technology. So, I mean, to answer the question, per se, actually, we can't call Google search engine as an AI. Well, will it actually improve your diagnosis, for which we have a chatbot? Like the example, Babylon has developed a chatbot actually, which actually showed fantastic accuracy in picking up a diagnosis in Rwanda. That's where they did their trials and developed the software. But then when they tested it in UK, it miserably failed. So these are the issues that needs to be dealt with. And the other thing is actually whether Google is going to develop its own chatbot. That I don't know. That depends on their business model and everything.
Thank you, Krishna. Are there any questions directly from any other participants, or Dr. Kushalappa, do you have any questions to the panelists, or can we take up your presentation as a conclusion remarks and reciprocation?
Yes, sir. I'd like to sum up the, if there are no other questions, I'd like to sum up the whole thing, sir, the webinar.
Yeah, please go ahead, Kushalappa.
Yes, sir. So thank you very much to all the panelists, and it has been a very, very productive afternoon as regards artificial intelligence. And this webinar has given us insights on entering a new arena towards the application of AI, and especially in healthcare, where it can assist in many areas, especially as diagnosis involving language processing. And also it has paved the path for the understanding of artificial intelligence in healthcare, like I said. And I'm sure the faculty and students who are listening to this webinar will start pursuing their work and interest in the field with this session and employ artificial intelligence in their applications. And I especially thank Dr. Sandeep Reddy. Sir, you're still there. I thank you very much for vividly encompassing how effective artificial intelligence can be applied and accommodated in the field of medicine, especially in the radiology. And you explained about the machines and their higher levels of intelligence, and explained how artificial intelligence works using the CNN model and interpreting of images. And also you explained about the clinical decision support system and the language processing, and also the application of artificial intelligence in surgery. And also you explained about the challenges faced in the use of artificial intelligence, including the legal challenges, and which was very, very highlighting in this webinar, sir. Thank you very much. And Dr. Sudha, you gave us a nice insight into how artificial intelligence actually developed way back during the World War II, and how it developed and evolved into what it is today. And Dr. Vikram explained how artificial intelligence is being used at JSS AHR and how it will be continued to be being used. And of course, the whole icing on the cake was Dr. Krishna's the comments on how the artificial intelligence can be applied to industry, and the shortfalls as of now, and the areas of improvement. And you gave us a lot of insight into that, sir. And IMIRA has joined hands with the JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research in implementing artificial intelligence at our academy. And we expect this alliance into the evolving of a center of excellence in artificial intelligence, Dr. Krishna. Thank you very much for that. And in conclusion, I'd like to say artificial intelligence will hopefully augment the human intelligence in healthcare decision making and delivery, and not replace it. With this, I thank all the panelists again, and especially I thank the words of wisdom and the opening remarks given by Dr. Basangada or BG sir, Dr. Surinder Singh, our Vice Chancellor, and the words of wisdom given by Pro Chancellor Dr. B. Suresh. Thank you very much, sir, and thank you all the participants for having attended this afternoon session.
Thank you very much.
Now I request the final words from our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Surinder Singh.
Thank you, Dr. BG. I think today's webinar it lays down the path for our future endeavors, not only for medical college, but the entire constituent colleges and university departments, and how they can incorporate artificial intelligence in their research projects and also into their curriculum in the long-term basis also, such. Because now this is an integral part of the entire education system as such. And today's webinar, I think we must thank all our guest faculty who had come and taken out their valuable time and joined us for today's deliberations, because we get immensely benefited by Dr. Krishna's and Dr. Reddy's inputs which have been there, besides Dr. Patil and Dr. Sudha. So this, I think, will be one of the relationship which we have already forged, but this is just a beginning as such. And we had also been all trying to see to at our end that at least 10% of our dissertation works which are being done across the JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, they have a component of artificial intelligence in it. So that each of the department, each of the division starts thinking of it and try to find out innovative ways that how intelligence, artificial intelligence can be becoming an integral part of their activities. And in this, we could rope in our colleagues and the faculty and the fraternity who are working in the engineering side. Their domain expertise, their knowledge will be beneficial for us in the long run also. And I think in the coming couple of years, I look forward to excellent research projects coming out of it and excellent publications, which will help us in ramping up our rankings, both at the global level and at the national level. So once again, I thank Dr. BG, his entire team, Dr. Patil, Dr. Sudha, Dr. Kushalappa, and my all other colleagues from the JSS Hospital who have joined hands to organize this webinar. So thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. And we look forward to a new era dawning on JSS Academy of Higher Education Research, especially with regard to research using artificial intelligence. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. I thank Kushalappa for excellent conclusion remarks. I thank you for supporting us, and I thank Prosi for giving this seed of conceiving the conduction of this very webinar. We expected a lot of participation, but there were about 175 participants at one point of time. Hope all of them are benefited. I'm very, very thankful to, we started with Australia, ended with UK, only for time convenience. And then we have had sandwiched our faculty in between. Hopefully it was useful, and we will come up with not more than 2 talks in each webinar, so that all the faculty who log in will be there. All the participants will be there. And I'm very, very thankful to all, especially Vikram, Sudha, Sandeep from Australia, and Krishna from UK. Thank you all, and thank all those who participated and asked questions. Then let us hope we will have little better, little more crisper, applicable AI webinar the next month. Thank you all.
Thank you.